Our next speaker is Jessica Bellamy. A designer and activist from Louisville, Kentucky, Jessica tells visual stories using data and personal narratives. In her work, driving social change through design, she partners with nonprofits and community groups to creating compelling materials that break down complex service and policy information. She currently is an Adobe Creative Resident and is spending the next year trying new approaches in her creative process and execution of her designs, as well as encouraging the creative community to support nonprofits and work with them on creative projects. Prior to creative residency, she founded and ran Grids, the grassroots information design studio in Louisville, working with local and national nonprofits, community groups, and social change initiatives. She also has an amazing Instagram account. Please welcome Jessica Bellamy.
Jessica. I'm not Jessica.
I am. Hello. He's just switching over my PowerPoint. Don't worry about the leg. You should see the other guy. Is everybody having a good time today? All right, I'm excited. Yeah, I love the energy. Thank you so much. All right, so my talk is all about accessing freedom, which is, it's the main motivation of why I do the work the way I do it and why I continue to create and make art. So I make information graphics, and all that means is that I take statistics and numbers and narratives and then combine them together to make visual stories. But that's not where my story begins. My story starts in Smoketown. Smoketown is a neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky. It is the oldest historically black neighborhood in the city. It was established in the 1860s, right after the Civil War. It was one of the few places where people of color were allowed to live. Smoketown has never really had a whole lot of resources and opportunities, but people have always pulled together to thrive. There's always been a very vibrant community, a rich culture and history, and it's kind of similar to today as it was back then. Smoketown today still has a lot of really strong families, a lot of people that are still invested. This is actually my grandmother right here. Hey, Nano. She has a soul food restaurant in Smoketown called Shirley Mae's Cafe. It's right in the dead center of Smoketown. My family has been engaged in Smoketown just as so many other folks, because when you don't have as many resources, whether or not it's the opportunities to start new businesses, are there always loans available, people tend to lean on each other, right? There's a lot of community businesses where people have known each other for years, where families continue to grow together. So back in 2013, there were a lot of changes in Smoketown. And that's because of a thing called gentrification. How many people have heard of the term gentrification? I see a lot of hands in the room. So what happens with gentrification is when sometimes people notice an area that has a lot of affordable properties, they find ways to buy up those properties in bundles, start making commercial properties, and start making homes that are more so for a class that can move in. And because Smoketown is located right next to downtown Louisville, and because downtown Louisville is so vibrant and big, there's constantly new hotels, restaurants, things like that, a lot of people from the suburbs and a lot of people that are moving to Louisville want to live next to the downtown area. So it was kind of no surprise that inevitably gentrification would touch Smoketown. Problem was, as developers were coming in and starting businesses that weren't affordable to current residents, and as people were buying properties to flip them for over $100,000, no one was asking people that already lived there questions about, well, where should we invest our money? What are resources and opportunities that we could bring? Because there was a lot of people that owned their own homes in the neighborhood that would still continue to live there. No one was asking those questions. Not until Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. That was an organization that I had joined back in 2013. And that chapter, the Jefferson County chapter, is located right in the heart of Smoketown as well, not far from my grandmother's restaurant. And we decided to start going door to door and asking folks what their priorities and concerns were. Because we figured, okay, if no one else is gonna ask, we're gonna ask. And we're gonna take that information to the developers, to the city officials, the policymakers, like anyone who has influences on the changes that we can see every single day in the neighborhood. That process took a while to do, but once we had gotten a lot of our data, we realized, okay, do we think that people are gonna read this really large document, just a whole bunch of text, especially if they already have exhaustive schedules, or maybe they're just not really interested in hearing what the community has to say? So I decided I'd make information graphics for it. At the time, I was working in research, but I had a background in graphic design, and I had turned like lots of my papers in college into infographics, but this was the largest project I had ever taken on at that time. It was very exciting. When we finally released the report, there was so much energy around it. Every resident had one. We were sending it out to people's offices. We were starting all these public forums, getting people engaged in what the data was showing and what people were saying. It wasn't until one public forum where literally the council member for the district was going through his normal routine of, oh, we can't do that in Smoketown because we don't have the funding for that, or we can't do this in Smoketown because no one really has interest in that. And a resident stood up with the report in hand and started saying, excuse me, da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. And me watching this argument go on where the council member could no longer speak. There was nothing that he could say that could refute what the data said. And the data was literally the weapon that allowed the residents to win the day in that public forum. It couldn't be ignored. Papers were writing about this report because of what we were able to do. Well, like I said, I had a really cushy job in research, but I was so inspired by this moment, I started my own business, GRIDS, which GRID stands for the Grassroots Information Design Studio. I started solely working with community groups and nonprofits making information graphics. And what made the work so rich and so wonderful was all the work and thinking that went behind it. I was constantly trying to think of conscious and responsible ways to not only design the data, but also let's talk about the communication strategies, right? How can we bring longevity to the work, put more impact with these graphics? And sometimes the work I was doing didn't even have design solutions. I was there to do consultations, to help elevate different campaigns that were happening in my city. My work became so well known that I started getting national clients. And then that work became well known to where I even got the attention of Adobe. Who's heard of Adobe? Awesome. So Adobe, a person who worked there, actually wrote me a little message and was like, you should apply to be an Adobe Creative Resident. And I thought, that's highly competitive. There was only 6 positions in the world to fill. Why would I do that, right? I was really intimidated. I felt like I was in a big fish in a small pond, like maybe I'm doing really well in Louisville, I have some national clients, but do I think that I could get an opportunity like this? Well, I said, heck, I'm gonna try it anyways. I ended up getting it. I'm one of 6 people in the world with this opportunity where my projects are being funded. Applications are open right now too, by the way, so remember that. Don't be afraid to try. But like I'm saying, like what made my work so valuable was the thinking behind it and the due diligence I was willing to do. And one thing that I knew very well was about barriers. The issues in Smoketown had to do with access to participation, access to the information that could really leverage an issue. Like there's so many barriers that I think people don't think about, but are really involved in every single thing that we do. Whether or not we're able to get further in our jobs, get further in school. There are access issues involving technology. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone has the internet. There are access issues involving mobility, whether or not it's transportation or your physical ability to walk. Like right now, I'm having a little bit of a physical ability to walk issue. But there's so many issues of barriers that we don't think about, but that should never stop us. I was so empowered by the energy around access. I started searching for other projects and other people that were doing similar work. And it's absolutely a national and international issue. Here's a quote from the former president of Kosovo. Democracy must be built through open societies that share information. When there is information, there is enlightenment. When there is debate, there are solutions. When there is no sharing of power, no rule of law, no accountability, there is abuse, corruption, subjugation, and indignation. Amen. Amen. So dream big. Dream big. Don't ever limit yourself. That's the biggest thing that I can share and impart onto you. Because start thinking about what happens if we don't have barriers, right? What happens if we don't have limitations to our access to what we're allowed to engage in or participate in? What happens when we have the ability to reform and rectify systems, whether they're legal systems or any other type of institutions? And what about if we all had the power to equip each other and share what we have to even empower the most vulnerable of us, the most marginalized, the most underrepresented? What would the world look like? My whole talk, I want to talk about accessing freedom. I want to talk about becoming limitless. And how one gets there is not just by yourself. It takes a whole team. It takes a whole team. So let's imagine for a minute. I'm just going to think of a couple of scenarios, and we're going to think big. Let's say that there's a program in which there is a service that's provided, but the people in leadership are not the people that are in need of the service. They're just the people that have the tools necessary to start it, right? And to maybe provide that service. But what happens when you take people that are most affected by the issue that program is trying to solve and put them in leadership? Because aren't they the ones who know the real root causes? Aren't they the ones who know the realistic solutions? Well, you're going to start making more effective programming. It's like if you imagine if you got the opportunity to lead your school. And when I say lead your school, I mean have meaningful influence. You know, like if you got to make changes that really matter to you and that actually affect your productivity. What would happen if the information that we use either in legal situations or any other really important circumstances, if we didn't just rely on text? What if there were more things that cater to visual learners and kinesthetic learners? We're going to increase engagement. Sometimes text can be intimidating. Sometimes people don't have time to read all of that, especially if you're a single mom and you've got this job and that job you need to go to. Maybe I don't have time to read this whole pamphlet about a service that I could really benefit from. Increase engagement. Let's talk again about schools. Let's talk about what if all facilities, all schools across the nation had the resources to create really robust leadership programs where you could shadow or intern at a career of your choice any day. How amazing would that be? Just trying stuff out like their shoes. You're going to increase opportunities for success. You're going to let everybody be able to dream as big as they want to and experiment in their own decisions. And what if our government started asking us questions, right? Like early on in the planning process, rather than, I don't know how many people follow news outlets, but I hate when I see a bill and they're like, did you know that this is about to hit Congress's table? No, I didn't know, but I wish I had known about the issue before it got to such a high place, right? Because if we were able to start having conversations in the initial planning processes, can you imagine the accountability, right, that comes with our ability to participate and engage? That's information that we could share. If that information was made transparent, then we'd all be active in it, especially if we knew it pertained to us directly. And what would happen if our media resources, whether it's television or the books that we read from age K all the way through high school, right, had so many more diversity, so much more diversity of voices, of faces? Well, we start to increase our ability to love each other, know each other, and we decrease social biases and prejudices. And what would happen if we took what we teach and instead of focusing on hard sciences and making that the credible thing that we judge each other by, if we started teaching more soft skills? I hate that they're called soft skills, but teaching leadership, teaching study skills, teaching how to be flexible, adaptive, how to work better with others, how to resolve conflicts. If we taught those things in school, think about how we'd raise our productivity, not only while we're in school, but even after. And how we'd even be better in working in teams and collaborating when we're actually in work in our services. And what would happen if we all did have access to computers and the internet? Now everybody knows that we use computers and technology as often as we can, especially younger generations, right? But it works for everyone. It improves not only our ability to excel in school, but it improves our ability to excel in our work lives. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to talk to you about accessing freedom and to dream big, and I hope I have inspired you all to be an ally of access. Thank you so much.